Good morning and welcome to Let the Bible Speak. My name is Alex Meredith. I'm the minister for the Marquette Church of Christ. Glad you joined me this morning. Today we're going to be continuing this series we've been on for a couple of weeks now. We've been talking about the origins of the Bible, and we're going to continue that discussion today. So I want to start out by going to Acts chapter 21. I want to read this passage to you, and then we're going to read a couple of passages actually, and then I want to draw out something from these passages. So starting in Acts 21, starting in verse 37, this is after Paul was arrested in the city of Jerusalem, and he's talking to first a Greek guard, and then he's talking to many of the Jews that are present there in Jerusalem. So Acts 21:37, as Paul was about to be brought into the barracks, he said to the tribune, "May I say something to you?" And he said, "Do you know Greek? Are you not the Egyptian then, who recently stirred up a revolt and led the 4,000 men of the assassins out into the wilderness?" Paul replied, "I am a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no obscure city. I beg you, permit me to speak to the people." And when he had given him permission, Paul, standing on the steps, motioned with his hand to the people. And when there was a great hush, he addressed them in the Hebrew language, saying, "Brothers and fathers, hear the defense that I now make before you." And when they heard that he was addressing them in the Hebrew language, they became even more quiet. And then he goes on to give this testimony of his conversion experience on the road to Damascus and how he came to be in the position that he's in. But that transition to talking in Hebrew to the Hebrew people, that made a big difference in the way that he was perceived. Did you notice that? Now let's back up. Go to Acts chapter 2. Starting in verse 1, and this is where we see the disciples, after the resurrection of Christ, gathered in Jerusalem. Look what happens. When the day of Pentecost arrived, they were all together in one place. This is a festival, by the way. You would have had people from all over the place there in that one city. And suddenly there came from heaven a sound like a mighty rushing wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. And divided tongues as of fire appeared to them and rested on each one of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. Now there were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men from every nation under heaven. And at this sound the multitude came together, and they were bewildered because each one was hearing them speak in his own language. And they were amazed and astonished, saying, "Are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear, each one of us, in his own native language? Parthians and Medes and Elamites, and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabians, we hear them telling in our own tongues the mighty works of God." There's this YouTuber out there, content creator. He goes by the name Xiaoma. And he's a very talented when it comes to learning languages. And his whole shtick is he goes out to these places where people maybe only speak in Mandarin or only speak in a particular dialect of Mandarin or Hindi or Telugu, like all these languages that most people in the States do not know. And then this ordinary, very American, very white, guy just goes up and starts talking to them in their native language. And it's amazing what happens in almost every one of those videos. There's this moment of shock and awe, just like, what? How do you know this language? And then there's an immediate respect and bond that's formed between them because, that's what language does. Language has this tremendous power to connect people to each other, and it also has the power to connect people to God. That's what we see happen in Acts 2, there on the day of Pentecost. So far in this series, we've been talking about the transmission of the Bible, and we've talked first about this idea of inspiration and the writing of the Bible. Then last week we talked about canonization, about how the books of the Bible came to be in the Bible, and then we talked about, today actually, we're going to be talking about translation, the translation of the Bible from the original languages into the languages we can understand today. And of course, in our context, mainly we're talking about English translations. So this is the third step in that transmission process. And really, over the course of about 3,500 years, what we're talking about is thousands of scribes, sometimes at significant personal risk, have faithfully copied the words of the Bible, millions of times total, in order to preserve and distribute the gospel all around the world. This is a fulfillment of that passage we have back in Acts chapter 1, verse 9, where Jesus tells the apostles that they are going to be his witnesses in Jerusalem, then in Judea and Samaria, and then to the ends of the earth. Well, as the Bible is shared with different nations, and as language is not only shared by those or varies between nations, but also as language evolves even, over time, translation becomes a necessity in order for people to understand and receive the word of the gospel. When we talk about the original languages, primarily, generally, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew and the New Testament was written in Greek. Now, particularly in the Old Testament, there's a small scattering of Aramaic in there as well, but by and large, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew and the New Testament was written in Greek. So all the translations that we have today, whatever translation you have, all of those translations are byproducts, either directly or indirectly, from the manuscripts that were written in the original languages. So let's talk about some of the history here regarding translations. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to share with you some of the major translations that have appeared over the course of history that have made a very large impact on the translations we have today. So to start off, and I think appropriately, the first and biggest one, certainly during the days of Jesus, would have been the Septuagint translation. The Septuagint, sometimes you'll see it abbreviated as LXX, just meaning 70, and that refers to the 70 translators that were called upon by Ptolemy II about 250 BC to translate the Hebrew Old Testament into Greek. Okay, so this was in the 3rd century BC. Now the Septuagint ended up being so predominant, so prevalent in the ancient world that by the time we get to the time of Jesus, the Septuagint was about as well known as the Hebrew, actually, as far as translations go. So much so, by the way, that many of the New Testament writers who are writing in Greek, when they quote certain things from the Old Testament, you'll notice that the wording and the syntax actually very often tends to align much more with the Septuagint rendering of it rather than a direct translation from the Hebrew very often. We don't have time to get into it right now, but if you're curious, look up the difference between Jeremiah 31:32 and Hebrews chapter 8, verse 9. Hebrews 8:9 actually quotes from Jeremiah 31:32, but you'll notice probably in your translation there's kind of an odd difference there. Well, the reason for that is because Hebrews 8:9 is quoting from the rendering of the Septuagint predominantly. So that was in 250 BC, the Septuagint, the Old Testament Hebrew into Greek. And then you have the Vulgate. The Vulgate's probably the next major step translation-wise. Written by Jerome about 382 AD. The Vulgate takes the Hebrew Old Testament and the Greek New Testament and translates it into Latin. This was the predominant translation for centuries by many in the church, the Latin Vulgate. And it wasn't actually too long ago that the Catholic Church really got away from using the Vulgate predominantly as the primary source text. The Wycliffe Bible, I would say, is really the next step. About 1,000 years later, in 1382, you have this man, John Wycliffe, who took the Vulgate Latin and translated it into what we would call today Middle English. Now, Middle English, most of us probably could not even really make sense of it today. You might recognize a word here and there, but it looks sort of like German if you don't know German. It is a different language, but it is somewhat English nonetheless, and what we would refer to as Middle English today. But that attempt in 1382 was really the first major attempt to translate the Bible into something that was understandable. And that's a big deal. Taking the Bible and turning it into something that we can make sense of today. Because most people during that medieval period, they didn't know Latin. Only the wealthiest and literate people in society actually knew Latin well enough to be able to read it. And so Wycliffe's goal was to allow more people to have access to the Bible. Tyndale did something very similar. William Tyndale. This was about 1535, right after the invention of the Gutenberg printing press. Now, what Tyndale did is he took the Old Testament Hebrew. Now, he didn't have all of the Hebrew manuscripts, and where he didn't, he supplemented it with the Vulgate. And then he took the New Testament Greek and translated the whole thing into modern English. Again, this is in 1535. This is very early modern English. It'd probably be pretty difficult for us to read today still, but again, English nonetheless. And again, the goal here was to make it understandable to the common folk. Now, being in 1535, aligning with the invention of the Gutenberg printing press, this was really the first Bible that was mass produced. This was the first Bible that was commonly distributed. Now, they were still quite expensive, but more just ordinary households would have them rather than just the one church in the village, right? You had some people getting their hands on them and able to read it themselves more often. The King James Version is probably the next major step after that. This is taking the Old Testament Hebrew and the New Testament Greek, so this is the first time we're working purely from just source material. Just source material. Remember back with the Wycliffe Bible, it was sort of a double translation because you had the Hebrew and Greek to Latin and then to English. Well, think about the game of telephone, right? It's going to be a lot more reliable if there's one step in that transmission process rather than multiple. That's why we're working from the original languages predominantly. And the King James Version is the first major translation to do pretty much just that, whereas the Tyndale Bible had to work a decent amount from the Vulgate itself. So the King James Version took the Old Testament Hebrew to New Testament Greek, translated it into early modern English, and that was in 1611, ordered by King James VI. Now, one of the things with the King James Version, fantastic translation, really, really solid translation. But two things I'll point out about it. One is that they did not, they had manuscripts for the entire Bible, but a lot of the manuscripts that they have were not some of the earliest ones they could have had, right? That's going to come into play in just a minute. And then, on top of that, as we read the King James Version today, if you were to read an actual 1611 version, just like we talked about earlier, you would probably have a really hard time understanding the words. It'd be really difficult to make sense of in certain parts. Language evolves over time. English language has evolved from early modern English, as was the case when the King James Version was written. This is why translations like the NIV, the ESV, the ASV came on board. Now, the first major translation to do what we're going to talk about here really was the New International Version, the NIV. So back in 1978, you have this effort to translate the original Hebrew and Greek into contemporary English, the English that I'm speaking to you right now, the English that we speak today. And those translations are based off of modern textual scholarship. And this is pretty much what all of these modern translations that are made today, the main ones anyway, follow this same model. It's from the original languages using the most up-to-date textual scholarship. What I mean by textual scholarship, remember we talked about how the King James Version didn't always have some of the oldest manuscript access? Well, that's what we're talking about here, right? Sometimes we can look at these manuscripts and we can look at a manuscript from the 8th century and we can say, this little portion of text, and normally it's just a couple of words, or it's a different ordering of words, or a different spelling of a name or something like that. Almost all the time it's not even significant enough to bother mentioning. But occasionally you'll have some phrase in there from a manuscript in the 8th century, and when we look back at all of the manuscripts from now we have access to the 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century, 6th century, you realize, oh, that wasn't originally in there. And there are a number of reasons that are not malicious why some of those texts can sneak in there. Some of it, one example is the the missed line, right? You have somebody copying something down and they accidentally skip a line and they jump down to the next one and don't realize that they actually skipped it. Well, if somebody looks at that 300 years later, they're not going to have any idea that guy accidentally skipped a line, but the volume of manuscripts that testify to the other reading help us verify, oh, it was just a mistake. We got it, right? That's why you'll hear these accusations sometimes about the NIV and all these modern translations. You'll hear this claim that, oh, they took out verses. One of the most prominent examples of this is in John chapter 5, verse 4. It talks about the pool of Bethesda and the angels stirring up the waters and everything. And more than likely, that was probably an expository note that a scribe put on there at some point. And then it sort of accidentally ended up in there. But our earliest manuscripts do not have that reading in there, which is why in the NIV and the ESV, you'll see this jump from verse 3 to verse 5. It's not because there's any malicious taking out of verses. It's because most recent modern textual scholarship has shown us that almost certainly that was not original to the text. Let's go to Revelation 22 for a second. I want to point something out here. So in Revelation 22, starting in verse 18, this is applicable to Revelation specifically, but I think you can also apply this more broadly to the Bible. I warn everyone who hears the words of the prophecy of this book. If anyone adds to them, God will add to him the plagues described in this book. And if anyone takes away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God will take away his share in the tree of life and in the holy city, which are described in this book. Obviously, we want to be accurate. That's the whole goal. When we talk about all these different translations, the goal is to be as accurate as possible. And translation is difficult work. Anyone who's learned a second language knows this. I'll give you an example. So in German, I took just enough German in high school to embarrass myself a few times. But I'll give you an example here from the little I learned. So in German, there's this phrase, das tut mir sehr leid. Now, das tut mir sehr leid, most often, you're going to see translated as something like, I'm sorry, or I'm very sorry. Well, guess what it translates to word for word? That causes me great sorrow. You're not going to hear anybody, any translator says, that causes me great sorrow. They're not going to write that out. They're not going to say that. If they're translating for somebody else, they're going to say, I'm sorry, because functionally that's what it means, right? Well, that happens with the Bible all the time. You know, when we talk about word-for-word translations, it doesn't always work because languages have different syntax. They have different connotations of certain words, right? One word in one language can sort of mean three different ideas in another. You know what I'm saying? And then idiomatically, we have certain idioms that don't literally mean what they appear to mean at first. And that's culturally specific, right? So let's do something. See if you can tell me which verse this is. I'm going to read you a precise word-for-word translation of this verse. See if you can tell what verse it is. Thus for loved the God the world, so that the Son the firstborn gave, that all the believers unto him not be destroyed, but have life eternal. It's John 3:16. Now, it's a jumbled mess of John 3:16, but it was probably at least recognizable enough where you could say, oh yeah, that's John 3:16. Well, let's do another one, another word-for-word translation. So the Greek here, you start out pater hemon ho entois uronois agostete to onoma su, and it goes on and on and on for about 6 lines. But I'm going to read you the English here. And this is, again, a literal word-for-word translation of this entire phrase. See if you know what it is. Father, art thee in the heavens, make holy the name your, come the kingdom your, become done the will your, as in heaven and on earth. The bread ours, the daily give us today, and leave us the debts ours, just as and we have left the debtors ours. And not lead into us into testing, but rescue us from the evil. Hopefully that is the least sense I will ever make on this show. I don't know. You can tell me if I'm wrong. But that is from Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 through 13. That is a literal word-for-word translation. Now, I'm going to give you my translation, my literal translation of this, best as I could kind of figure it out here. So this is Alex's literal translation of Matthew 6, 9 through 13. Our Father, the one who is in the heavens, may your name be holy. May your kingdom come, may your will come upon the earth, as it does also in heaven. Today give us our bread, the usual kind, and forgive our debts, in the same way we also forgive the ones indebted to us. Also, do not lead us into trial, but deliver us from the one who is evil. It's better, right? But it's still a little clunky. Let's try this one more time. This is from the English Standard Version. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Now, I've got to ask you, are any of those three translations, from the word for word to the ESV, are any of those three translations wrong? No. They're really just different iterations of the same thing. It's a single idea represented in multiple ways. Now, we've got a graphic we want to pull up for you to show you here. Every translation that we have falls on something we call the translation equivalency scale. And that's what you're looking at here. And the way this works is the scale goes from formal to functional. More formal translation, all that means is that you're being more literal with your translation. You're getting closer to word for word. Now, practically, there are no biblical translations that are actually word for word because it would just sound like gibberish. Even Young's literal translation, probably the most well-known word for word translation out there, it has to swap words around and it has to use the more sensible translations for certain words in certain contexts. Because if it didn't, it would make zero sense a lot of times. But formal is more closely related to that word for word, whereas functional, you start to get closer to more readability, but it sacrifices the closer word, the closer translation, literally speaking. Now, all of those translations that you just saw up on there, Young's literal translation, the ASV, the KJV, the NIV, NET, CEV, those are all good translations, but they have different purposes. This is a big thing that people miss out on when we talk about translations. They'll say, oh, well, I like this one because it's closer to the text, or I like this one because it's more understandable. That's fine. They both are good translations, but they have different purposes, right? When you're reading Young's literal translation, a lot of it is for people who do not know Hebrew and Greek. I certainly don't know any Hebrew. For people who don't know Hebrew and Greek, you get closer to the original rendering of those words, right? And the original meaning of those words. But for somebody who's just getting into the Bible for the first time, who doesn't really understand the stories or understand the language that's often used in these stories, maybe something like the Message is helpful. Not for detailed, in-depth study necessarily, but you see what I mean? They serve different purposes. One of the questions I always get when we talk about translations are there any translations I should just outright avoid? And this is what I always tell people. Generally, any translation that's done by one person, that's not always the best because there's nobody to check them on it. And then, generally, any translation that is denomination specific. So if a particular group with a certain orientation of beliefs puts out their own translation, oftentimes those translations will be bent very much skewed and in favor of whatever that group believes, right? I appreciate a much fairer, neutral rendering of the text. Again, all those ones that I showed you are good translations. You know, when we're talking about English, we take translation for granted. There are about 900 translations in the English language right now of the Bible. There are about 36.8 million people in about 888 languages all around the world who have zero. They don't have any ability to read the Bible right now. In fact, 1.5 billion people lack the ability to read the Bible in their first language. Now, there are groups out there Pioneer Bible Translators, the Wycliffe Bible Translators, American Bible Society, Deaf Bible Society, Illuminations, Biblica. I'm not affiliated with any of these groups. I'm just letting you know there is work being done out there that is helping to advance the effort to make the Bible accessible in all these different languages. There's a great video that the Pioneer Bible Translators have on their website about translating the Bible into the Apal language, a small tribal language spoken in Papua New Guinea. That's worth a look if you get the time to. But basically, when we talk about this idea of translation, all we're talking about is communicating Jesus to the world in a language and in a way that they can understand. And I think that's a good challenge for all of us. That's a good reminder for all of us to strive for that end. So I want to wrap up by reading you just one passage from Isaiah 52, as long as we're talking about bringing the good news to the world. Isaiah 52, starting in verse 7. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who publishes peace, who brings good news of happiness, who publishes salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns. The voice of your watchmen, they lift up their voice. Together they sing for joy. For eye to eye they see the return of the Lord to Zion. Break forth together into singing, you waste places of Jerusalem. For the Lord has comforted his people. He has redeemed Jerusalem. The Lord has bared his holy arm before the eyes of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth shall see the salvation of our God. That's our goal here, right? We don't have time to get into all of the different things we normally do at the end of our show, but one thing I did want to just remind you of, if you do not have a Bible, as long as we're talking about having access to the Bible, if you do not have a Bible, that's something that Let the Bible Speak for a long time now. We're always happy to send you a Bible. We do that totally free of charge. We don't expect you to pay shipping. We don't expect anything from you on that end. Just know that you can request that from us and we'll get that to you. You can go to letthebiblespeak.net for the information on that and how to get in touch with us and request that. We're going to continue and actually wrap up this series next week in talking about biblical interpretation. We hope you'll join us for that. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining me this morning. May God bless you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.